And this afternoon, in wonderfully sunny conditions, the Tour de France, after 4 racing days and 225 miles, finally came home. It crossed the borders between Germany and France. It was a day when Stephen Roach, you wouldn't forget yesterday, patrolled the pack to make sure no one else escaped. And for the yellow jersey of Eric Mackler, he was a captive. He never attacked all day. But the accidents go on. A mistake by someone, and they're all down once more. The whole field was glad to be back on the road to Strasbourg. And the Carrera team were on their best guard, thinking of keeping this man in yellow for a while yet. Andy Hampsten, on his best behavior. Neither he nor anyone else attacked today.
So the Tour de France has entered its native land, where it will stay for the next 3 weeks. No change in the standings, really. Eric Mackler held on to the yellow jersey. With Andy Hampsten and his American team still very much in contention. Next Sunday we'll be in the wine country of Bordeaux to bring you more of the greatest bike race on earth, the Tour de France. For Phil Liggett, I'm John Dockery. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the Tour de France. If you can't ride your bike on the road, carry it across a field. If your body can't take the strain, the Tour will provide a ride. Tempers are as hot as the blistering heat. Even the bikes of steel are cracking under the pressure. All for a chance just to touch the immortal yellow jersey. With a mission. Fourth in the Tour last year with the European team, Hampsten is back with his American team to win the Tour de France. But Stephen Roach, the Irishman riding with an Italian team, is a favorite to wear the yellow jersey in Paris, and he has one of the best teams in cycling behind him. French cycling machine System U, with their high-tech attack, is armed with a double-barreled assault with emerging star Charlie Motet. Also threatening is two-time Tour champion Laurent Fignon. They have their own designs on the yellow jersey in a Tour still searching for a leader. For the 5th straight year, CBS Sports is proud to bring you the greatest bike race on earth. Welcome to the Tour de France. This intersection of D94 and D32 here in Yerres, France may seem insignificant to you folks, but it has a lot of meaning in this year's Tour de France because it's the only spot the riders will see more than once. When they come by 2 weeks from now, Paris in the coveted yellow jersey will only be about 20 miles away. But today when they come by, they'll still have 2,000 miles left on their journey. down through the wine country of Bordeaux, and then the perilous mountains, the Pyrenees and the Alps, and some of the toughest climbs on this planet. So before the glory of the Champs-Élysées, these riders will have to survive 2 weeks on their bicycles and a rigorous journey across France. A journey which began 2 weeks ago in Berlin, the most distant point ever for a tour start. In the center of the city, the tour began with the prologue time trial, a short sprint and the first chance for a rider to emerge from the pack. Of the stars, 27-year-old Stephen Roche would have the best time in this first of 26 races. The Irishman, now living in Paris, seems totally recovered from his knee surgery of last year. The tour would spend 4 days in Germany before large crowds, most of whom had never seen the great race before. And ironically, a Polish cyclist would lead the race in this divided land. Lech Piasecki wore the yellow jersey, which goes to the rider with the best overall time. Easily the biggest early test for Andy Hampsten in 7-Eleven was the team time trial. 9 men against the clock, critical for a team leader like Hampsten, because the team time is his time. Last year, Laurent Fignon and his System U machine destroyed the Americans. Not so last week, when System U only beat 7-Eleven by seconds and not minutes. The American team had passed their first test against their more experienced European rivals and had done it with high marks. From Berlin, a short flight over East German territory to Karlsruhe, West Germany, then on to Stuttgart. It was here that Charlie Motet broke away from the stars, leaving them far behind. But the real story was Stephen Roche's teammate, Eric Mackler. His pursuit of the yellow jersey here would later haunt the Carrera team. As Eric Mackler headed to the finish line, his pursuers were still out on the streets of Stuttgart among the thousands of cheering crowds. And when it was over, it was Eric Mackler, the first Swiss rider in 30 years to wear the Golden Fleece. It was 1 week ago today that the tour came home, crossing the border into France, where it would stay for 3 weeks. From Strasbourg, the rolling caravan continued west through Champagne country and races we will highlight today. It passed just below Paris before turning south to Bordeaux and some of the finest vineyards in the world. Here the course is flat, the heat intense. Further south and finally to the Pyrenees and the first mountains. The Pyrenees, a natural border between France and Spain. And as if the Pyrenees weren't enough, the Alps come next with some of the toughest climbs ever in the 74 years of the Tour de France. Finally, it's north to Paris and the Champs-Élysées, where the winner will wear the yellow jersey after riding for almost a month and 2,524 miles in 26 days. And the question this year, with Greg LeMond still in California recovering from his hunting accident, who will replace last year's champion as the best rider in the world? Will it be America's best hope, Andy Hampsten? He's already suffered a crash and is finding the tour tough from the very start. Race favorite Stephen Roche has been spending his final moments before races in an ambulance trying to relieve some stubborn muscle spasms. Laurent Fignon, winner of the Tour in 83 and 84, has been recovering from serious injury the last few years. He seems to be slowed down by a nagging cold. One has to wonder if a healthy upstart can seize the opportunity to win, and Charlie Motet may be just the man to do it. An unusually tough early test may give us some answers when we come back.
There's no doubt that everybody who rides the Tour de France wants to wear the leader's yellow jersey, even if it's only for 1 day. And the sponsors of the team, too, demand this from the team because they want the publicity. Take this last week, for example. Eric Mackler of Switzerland has been leading for the Italian Carrera team. But he, they say, is not the rider who can win the Tour. and yet the team has spent an enormous amount of energy keeping him in yellow. And at the same time, Stephen Roach, the rider they believe can win the Tour, has had to defend when he should really be thinking of saving energy for the mountains of the Pyrenees and the Alps. It's quite true to say that the pressures on the individual rider are enormous, and some of them, you know, simply can't take it. Eric Mackler is the first Swiss rider to wear the leader's yellow jersey since 1953, and he intends to keep it for as long as possible. But this may be bad news for Ireland's Stephen Roach, who finds his Carrera team committed to help a man who in the end hasn't the all-round ability to win. How to dislodge Mackler is the question of the day, and plans are made. It's time for Frenchman Charlie Motte, the Tour's dark horse, to come out into the sun. There's also Laurent Fignon, twice a winner, but he's still searching for those halcyon days. Right now, appearances are more important. And there's Andy Hampsten, still seen as the next American winner of the Tour. The thought of the yellow jersey haunts him daily, but it doesn't always show. But on this warm morning, the Tour de France is about to deliver yet another surprise in this intriguing game of bluff. And Mexican Raul Alcala aims to become the name on everyone's lips. And that's because today's stage between Strasbourg and Epinal of 106 miles is mountainous for the first time, and Alcala is a climbing specialist. He joined the American 7-11 team last year, and he's the only Mexican rider ever to ride the Tour de France. It hasn't taken him long to become infected with Tour fever. The only cure is a yellow jersey. The 202 survivors of this 2,500 miles marathon are in buoyant mood this morning as they set off due west towards Epinal. After a week in Germany, the Tour has come home. No Frenchman has won a stage or even led the race. So once out of town, the pressure was applied. This was not going to be just another day in the Tour de France. Soon after the start, the attack started and the gaps began to open. Only a few miles out of Strasbourg, and already the day's pattern was taking shape. And it would be quite a day in the life of Mexican Raul Alcala. Andy Hampsten, back in the pack, was happy enough as his teammate from Mexico went off in search of regaining time he'd lost so far. Eric Mackler would need more than just water to keep him cool this day. The 10-men breakaway was heading for the slopes of the Vosges Mountains, and the early attack had surprised the slumbering main field. They would pay heavily for their error. Only 20 miles out, and the group is already 58 seconds in front. And encouraged by the early gains, the breakaway works well together. But behind for some, there are more important things to worry about, like just keeping up with the pack. Christophe Levan is in the break. He's only 3 minutes 29 seconds behind the yellow jersey. Alcala is next best placed. He's 5 minutes 57 seconds back. It's too early for the man to think of victory. It's just time to keep cool. It's not unusual for the race to be under attack so soon, but there's plenty of time yet to straighten things out. But Alcala wasn't up front to waste energy. He had no intention of losing the advantage the leaders had worked hard for. He's a climber, and the gentle hills of the Vosges suited his style. Behind, Alcala's 7-11 team have moved to the front with Christophe Levan's System U squad. The strategy was to discourage the pursuit and give the leaders as much time as possible to gain it. Conductor hosting the Tour de France is not always easy, especially when no one is sure now who's calling the tune. Certain now that the attack is a serious attempt to take Mackla's yellow jersey, the Carrera team take up the chase, but no one else is willing to help. That's the penalty when you leave the Tour. Trapped in the field, Mackla has more than just thinking to do now. This is Alcala's second Tour de France, and he's on the 7-11 team to help Andy Hampsten win the race. This is no double cross. It's better to have two men near the top than one. The bunch is mostly together as they approach the top of the first climb. But some were in desperate trouble at the back.
Come on, Brian, come on.
Far behind the pack, two riders from the newest of the 23 teams in this year's race, Graham Jones and Paul Watson, part of the first ever British team at the Tour de France. And on their very first climb, the British riders suffering 15 minutes behind the pack. This was a controversial journey for the British because many in England believed the British team for the Tour had been assembled in haste. But the British were determined to be here this year to commemorate the 20th anniversary of Tom Simpson's death. The great British cyclist died in the Alps during the '67 Tour. Even a friendly push wouldn't help Watson and Jones make it to next Sunday's memorial service on Mont Ventoux. They would become two more victims of the Tour de France.
So on the Tour de France's first full day on home soil, it's a Mexican, Raul Alcala, who is giving everyone food for thought. Riding like a veteran of many tours, the normally always smiling Alcala is in serious mood as he fuels up for the crucial miles that still lie ahead. His main rival for the leader's yellow jersey is young Frenchman Christophe Leven, forced to become a professional early because his parents couldn't afford to keep him at home. The biggest fear of Tour riders is to become hungry and see all the efforts wasted. Table manners have no place here. This has now become the greatest chase since the Tour began, or perhaps it should be called the greatest escape. The gap is now 5 minutes 34 seconds. This breakaway has never faltered, and after a steady start, the escape has developed into a battle between a Frenchman and a Mexican, and both want the yellow property of the Swiss rider Eric Mackla. Now the alarm bells are ringing loudly, and the Carrera team are brought to the front to try and save the day. With no friends in the pack, the team begin to work hard to repair the damage. Son of an auto mechanic, Alcala was discovered in a local Mexican race, and he was imported to America to become a professional cyclist. The Carrera team continues to pull together, and Mackla himself is going to have to help if the yellow jersey is to hang on his bedpost tonight. Only Stephen Roach, the team leader, is not helping in pursuit. The gap is now 7 minutes 59 seconds. With such a lead, Leven is the new leader on the road, because he started the day only 3 minutes 29 seconds behind. Alcala is the next best place. If he could slip Leven, he could lead the race. It's been a good day too for Andy Hampsten, because he's drafted along in the bunch, while the Carrera team has been forced to waste energy chasing down Hampsten's teammate. Roach doesn't seem too worried, but it may be Laurent Fignon, another possible Tour winner who will be having the last lap. He knows it's Roach's teammates who are having to chase down one of his men up front. So this has become a nightmare day for the Carrera team. They feel the full responsibility of leading the race, and as time ticks away, the yellow jersey begins to look fallible. To wonder now why one team spends so much energy trying to keep the lead when it could cost Roach the race later. The final cards in this game have not yet been played. We'll be back. And so as the Tour de France snaked its way towards Epinal, the Carrera team had at last begun to close in. And this was the signal for Christophe Leven to go ahead of the leading group and bid for the yellow jersey. This was Raul Alcala's only mistake of the day. He should have marked Leven, then he wouldn't have had to chase so late. After a day of working together to beat the rest, two men now become bitter rivals. And the best boot in this year's Tour de France is on. Leven, 23 years old and never a stage winner nor holder of the Golden Fleece, is told of his advantage over Alcala and the field. It's 47 seconds with the pack closing at 4:20. Alcala's also worried about the pursuit behind. He's in no man's land and needs all the encouragement he can get now from his team car. Alcala must now show the resistance over these final miles that makes the difference between the good and the great. But with the experience of 3 tours, Leven is also coached by Cyril Guimard, the best manager. Advantage Leven. The Carrera team are still all alone in pursuit. The lead is crumbling, but at what cost in the days to come? Mackler is now within seconds of saving his yellow jersey, when earlier the loss seemed inevitable. The Tour was at its most angry now. But on the first day of the Tour, on home ground, a Frenchman was fighting for the yellow jersey. What could be better? This was certainly Leven's finest moment. Alcala continues to chase. The Mexican star was shining brightly. He was still set to finish second. But the Carrera team had closed the gaps, and neither Alcala nor Leven will be in yellow tonight. The Italian team had won the day, but what a pursuit. Then on the narrow roads approaching the finish, the field crashed. The followers were paying the price for not helping the Carreras. Even Andy Hampsten was down, but unhurt. The delay, however, helped Leven keep up his escape, and Alcala kept his lead for second place. Hampsten fell into a ditch and wrecked his bike and had to look to his nearest teammate, who happened to be Davis Phinney. He took Phinney's bike, leaving him to take a wheel and rejoin later. Teamwork takes strange turns in the Tour. And now it's Phinney's job to catch up, if he can. Hampsten safely ahead. Phinney's left to pick up the pieces. At the finish, there's a great cheer for Christophe Leven, who wins his first ever stage of the Tour de France. Behind, the Carrera team still head the reassembled pack. They're heading for home now. The team has saved the day for the man in yellow. Alcala never caught Leven, but he showed the tenacity of a great fighter by staying ahead of the rest for second place. It's a performance that will prove to Hampsten he now has a strong ally. When the pack arrived, the Carrera team had excelled, and the pursuit, which lasted all day without help from anyone, had paid off. The Tour had also found itself another name too, Raul Alcala. It'll be fiesta time in Epinal tonight. So at the end of day 6, Leven failed by just 36 seconds to take the yellow jersey from Eric Mackler. And for the moment, the real stars keep their back seat, while Hampsten recalls the crash.
It happened real fast, but boy, a lot of people went down, and when I got up, I was pretty confused. Just from tumbling around at 30 miles an hour, and I couldn't find my bike, and it was, I was kind of in a panic to get going again. But Davis Phinney was right there, so he gave me his bike and shoved me on the way, and then Jeff Bradley brought me halfway up the pack, and Jeff Pierce brought me all the way to the front. And once I got there, Boyer kind of nursed me all the way in.
While Hampsten and his 7-Eleven teammates were working to survive crashes, the Carrera boys were loose and happy to have one of their own, Eric Mackler, with the yellow jersey. But what does their star, Stephen Roach, think about having the lead this early in the Tour?
For me, it will by far, but I'm not the boss.
But you'd unload it if you could?
Oh, definitely. Not so much to unload it, but it's because a lot of other teams are just sitting in the wheels doing nothing, and they will ride to the mountains like this in an armchair, And then in the mountains, they'll not even say thank you.
Oh, yeah? Yes.
The reward at the end of a long day of riding takes place here on the massage table with a soothing rub. A job performed only by men up until last year. 23-year-old April Wilburn is now one of 3 women trainers, or what is called a soigneur, for a professional cycling team. Part of her daily routine is to massage the aching bodies of the riders. And as you might well imagine, the question of a female trainer working with male athletes raises some eyebrows. But this is 1987, and the tour has changed.
A body's just a body. It's not like you're lusting over these guys. You know, like my friends, they say, God, you're working around all these guys all the time. How can you handle it? But that's when you know you're an amateur and when you're a professional. You know, when you work professionally, it doesn't really faze you too much.
Here is the original female soigneur, American Shelley Versus. She was the only woman on the tour last year when she worked for 7-Eleven. Now she is the first woman working with a European team.
My sunglasses back.
Shelley knows well the difficulties of being the first woman in a man's sport in Europe.
I know. Well, with the 7-Eleven boys, they were all American. It was totally natural for me to work with them. I was like their sister. It was no big deal. Title IX, equal rights. A woman massaging a guy was no problem. But when I came to Toshiba, all these boys are foreign, except for Greg and Steve Bauer. They didn't speak English. All of a sudden, this chick comes along, American, to massage them. And they weren't sure whether to leave their underwear on, take it off, what was their wives going to say. It was a problem with the mechanics of my team because usually the soigneur room's with a mechanic. But the mechanic's wives didn't want me to room with them, so I have a single room all the time. That was kind of difficult, you know.
A day in the life of a soigneur begins at dawn, hours before the riders wake up. Preparing the food and drink for the riders takes some doing. Each day, a team consumes 20 gallons of drinks, 50 sandwiches, 20 packs of dried fruits, and 60 pounds of fresh fruit, all the while making sure each rider has his own special menu for his day on wheels. Then it's time to wake up the team, far better than any alarm clock I've ever seen. Because of the physical exertion involved, racing teams only once considered men capable of doing this job. First, the cooler goes in the trunk. And then a truckload of luggage. Remember, it's 9 riders on a team in a different hotel every night for 26 nights. And all this has to be done even before they get to the race start, where more work awaits, the little last-minute race preparations and the like. There are other women in unlikely places on the Tour de France, and the number, as well as the acceptance of women, is growing each year. The riders seem to like it, and the race organizers are beginning to embrace the change. Only 4 years ago, women had to hide their hair under baseball caps to disguise themselves while riding in the caravan.
Not only there were no women, but they were forbidden. I mean, when a woman was seen in a car, it was a very strong misdemeanor. I mean, it was seen as a big breach of the rules. But now women are very important. As you see that we have a masseurs with the 7-Eleven team, and we'll see more and more of them. I think they are good sport, they are good fun, and they are good friends, and that's right.
The barriers for women are disappearing in the Tour de France, and this is only the beginning of a new era in a race set aside by its tradition. It's day 10 of the tour, and the race today starts in a most unlikely spot, an equestrian arena in the town of Saumur, for this all-important race. Today's individual time trial is the first real test of this year's race. For a rider to even dream of winning the Tour de France, he has to do well here. Now, for the pure climbers, well, they'll be trying not to lose time before getting to their specialty next week in the Pyrenees and the Alps. For the other riders, they'll be trying to put distance between themselves and those who excel in the mountains. But one thing is abundantly clear here today. The standings will change, and the favorites for this year's Tour de France will step forward. One of those stars expected to emerge is Sean Kelly, the #1 rider in the world. But he's not fully recovered from a recent illness. Andy Hampsten is still being talked about as a possible Tour winner, but he's never been on a 55-mile time trial before. The normally affable Stephen Roach knows today is serious business, but the importance of the time trial has even him edgy.
I'll have to wait and see you.
Feeling good? If I get to the last 20 kilometers and I have nothing, like a lot of people will be today, it'll be all over. So I'll try to avoid a disaster and do a real good time.
The first of today's favorites, Sean Kelly, is in the start house and ready to go.
And Kelly, like everyone else who are pretenders to the title, now face the most important day so far. This is the longest time trial since 1951. The next 55 miles for Andy Hampsten will be the most crucial of his career. Kelly is the first to leave among the fancied riders. While in the start house, Hampsten fills up with air. He'll need plenty today. Each rider starts after an interval between of 2 minutes. The last man overall goes first, and the leader of the race goes last. And behind Andy Hampsten, Stephen Roach awaits the signal. Sean Kelly fights to find his rhythm. He already appears to be struggling. While Hampsten, carrying all the American hope for victory, quickly settles on his aerodynamic bike. These early miles tell a rider straight away how his body will react to the steady punishment of the race against the clock. But Stephen Roach is a time trial specialist. He is out to impress. This is his big chance. Kelly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, concentrates hard, trying to shut out the pain of effort as he passes a slower rider who started 2 minutes in front. In the start house is Charlie Motte, France's hope now Bernard Hinault has retired. Hampsten is really a climber, but he can only hope here to limit his losses to men like Roach. Roach hopes to play his first trump card, but the time trial demands so much from a confused body, and Roach is hoping today it will come right. He moves past a teammate, showing why he is the chosen leader of the team. Holding a constant speed of 28 miles per hour is the ability of only a few. One of those is Roach. Motte is also underway now. He too, like Roach, relishes the time trial, and 2 years ago he won France's biggest, the Grand Prix de Nation. Kelly continues up ahead, still searching for comfort. He is not riding well on a hilly course that should have suited him. And Motte, racing through a corridor of noise, knows the cheers are all for him. His own lonely furrow, Hampsten is losing 4 minutes to Roach, and that's not good. While for Kelly, it can't be over too soon. Hampsten continues with the anxious glance at his watch, showing his concern. Roach is the giant of the time trial, and the time check's showing to be ahead at all checkpoints. The longest time trial ever for Andy Hampsten is almost over, and every second counts as he fights for the line. His time of 2 hours, 4 minutes and 31 seconds is not a great time for a top contender. Hampsten's dug himself a hole he's going to literally have to climb out of in the mountains next week. But for the Irishman Stephen Roach, this was the moment of truth for him.